As the earliest rays of sunrise cast long shadows across the desolate Arizona desert, Caleb Whitaker, a grizzled cattleman, traversed the arid terrain on horseback. He'd spent hours searching for stray livestock when his heart jolted at an eerie sight, a lone wooden cross, standing starkly in the barren wilderness like a silent sentinel. It wasn't a grave marker, but its ominous presence sent a chill through his weathered frame, hinting at a malevolent intent lurking beneath the surface. Caleb guided his horse closer, his pulse quickening as he saw her, a young girl, scarcely 11, bound to the cross with coarse rope that cut cruelly into her tender wrists. Her clothes hung in ragged strips, her face marred by grime and the faint tracks of long-dried tears. A crude wooden sign dangled from her neck, its words chilling him to the core. "Come back when you're purified." In his quarter-century of wrestling this unforgiving land, he'd encountered brutality, bandit raids, assaults by desperate souls driven to madness by the relentless sun. But this was something else entirely. This was methodical, cloaked in a false piety that turned his stomach. The girl's eyes met his as he approached, wide with dread but flickering with a fragile spark of hope. She was alive, alert, though her lips were parched, cracked from thirst, and her frail body trembled with exhaustion. She'd been lashed there for hours, perhaps since the previous night's end. "Stay strong, little one," Caleb murmured, swinging down from his saddle. His hands shook as he drew his knife to slice through the ropes. "You're safe now. I'm getting you out of this." As the bindings fell, the girl crumpled into his arms, light as a wisp, her body racked with shivers. Caleb wrapped her in his worn coat, feeling the violent tremors that coursed through her slight frame. "Who did this to you?" he asked softly, but her silence spoke louder than words. Her throat seemed raw, as if she'd screamed until her voice gave out. Scanning the horizon, Caleb spotted faint wagon ruts stretching toward the distant peaks, already fading under the morning's breeze. Whoever had done this was gone, likely trusting the desert scavengers to finish their grim task. But another detail twisted his insides. The cross wasn't a hasty construct. It was polished, expertly crafted. The ropes bore signs of wear, suggesting repeated use. The post was driven deep into the earth, a permanent fixture in the sand. This wasn't an isolated act. Others had been bound here before. The girl stirred, and when her gaze met his, her eyes held not just fear, but haunting recognition, as if she feared this nightmare might recur. Caleb carried her to his horse, his mind racing. His ranch, nestled in a valley framed by rust-hued canyon walls, had always been his haven. But as he crossed its threshold with the girl in his arms, that sense of safety shattered. Her injuries went beyond the rope burns and dehydration. She was broken in ways that cut deeper than flesh. He settled her gently in a sturdy chair by the hearth, but she curled into herself, her eyes darting to every window, every shadow, as if danger lurked in every corner. "I'm fetching you water," Caleb said, moving slowly toward the pump in the corner. A sharp gasp stopped him in his tracks. The girl had flattened herself against the wall, trembling at the thought of being left alone, even for a moment. He handed her a tin mug, watching her clutch it with scarred hands. Small, precise marks that were too deliberate to be random. Someone had hurt her systematically, over time. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked, keeping his voice low and gentle. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She touched her throat, wincing, then shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. Caleb's anger flared. Whatever had been done to her had stolen her voice, perhaps forever. As she sipped the water, he noticed old, healed rope scars circling her ankles. This wasn't her first time bound. The cross in the desert was just one chapter in a long tale of torment. Kneeling to her level, Caleb tried to soothe her fear. "You don't have to speak, but if someone's after you, if they harmed you, I need to know." Tears welled in her eyes as she pointed toward the mountains where the tracks had led. Then she raised her hand, showing 5 fingers, repeating the gesture 3 times. 5 people. Caleb asked. She shook her head, pointed to herself, and held up 5 fingers again. 5 children like you? She nodded, tears spilling down her dirt-streaked cheeks. A cold dread settled over Caleb's heart. There were others, for more children, somewhere out there, enduring the same horrors. He paced the window, staring at the endless desert stretching toward the jagged peaks. Someone was collecting children, torturing them under a twisted pretense. "They'll come for you," he muttered, more to himself than to her. The girl opened her fist, revealing a small, carved bone shaped like a dove. Words were etched into it. "The purified shall ascend." Caleb's throat tightened. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a perversion of faith, a cult cloaking their evil in divine rhetoric. The girl pointed to the carving, then to herself, and held up one finger. She was the first, take a month ago. She signaled by opening and closing her hands 3 times. 30 days. For more children had been taken since. Caleb grabbed his spyglass and climbed to the attic, scanning the mountain for any sign of life. A glint of metal flickered in Serpent's Gorge, a labyrinth of rock where outlaws and renegades had hidden for generations. Thin smoke rose from behind a red-hued mesa, maybe 6 miles off. A camp, and not a small one. When he returned, the girl stood by his rifle cabinet, pointing urgently at a faded wanted poster pinned to the wall. The face was Jeremiah Amos Holt, a preacher exiled from multiple territories for his unusual practices with children. She tapped the poster, then her chest, nodding fiercely, confirming Holt as her captor. Caleb's fists clenched. Holt wasn't just a preacher. He was a predator hiding behind a holy book. The cross, the carving, the talk of purification. It was all part of his distorted doctrine. "He's got the others in those mountains," Caleb said, his voice hard as flint. The girl nodded, then knelt, folding her hands in a trembling prayer, her body shaking with fear. They'd forced her to pray to their warped deity, while they tormented her. "No more their prayers," Caleb said, helping her rise. "We're stopping them." But the sound of hoofbeats interrupted, rapid and heavy, approaching from the western trail. The girl froze, diving behind a stack of crates, her eyes wide with terror. She knew those sounds. Her captors had tracked her down. Caleb grabbed his Winchester and peered through the shuttered window. 7 riders approached, clad in black like mourners at a funeral, led by a tall, gaunt man with a silver beard and a staff topped with a carved deer, Ezekiel Morse. They halted 60 yards from the porch, close enough to parley, but far enough to avoid a quick shot. Morse sat high in his saddle, his pale gray eyes cold as winter stone. "Brother Whitaker," Holt called, his voice smooth and commanding, "the Lord guides us to your doorstep, seeking a lost dove." Caleb stepped onto the porch, rifle ready but held loosely. Behind him, the girl's ragged breathing betrayed her fear. "No stray livestock here, preacher," he replied. "Try the traders north of here. They're always losing their stock." Holt's smile was sharp and cold, like a blade glinting in the sun. "The dove we seek walks on 2 legs. A child, pure but stained by defiance, placed on a cross of redemption to reflect on her transgressions." "And what transgressions are those?" Caleb asked, his finger brushing the trigger lightly. "She spoke against her guardians, questioned the Almighty's word to his chosen servant," Holt said, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Such pride must be cleansed before it corrupts the others in our care." Caleb's grip on the rifle tightened. These weren't disciples. They were captors, holding children as prisoners. "Haven't seen any children today," he said coolly. "Just buzzards and rattlers. You'd blend right in." Holt's men shifted in their saddles, hands inching toward their holsters, but the preacher raised his staff, holding them back. "Your horse's tracks lead from our place of worship to your ranch, Brother Whitaker. God's truth cannot be hidden." "Desert wind wipes tracks clean," Caleb countered, his voice steady. "Makes a man question what he thought he saw." One of Holt's men leaned forward, impatience in his tone. "Brother Jeremiah, the sun's high. Let's search his house." Caleb chambered around, the sound echoing off the canyon walls like a warning shot. "First man through my door meets his maker." Holt raised his hand, but his eyes were calculating, weighing the odds. 7 against 1 were good odds, but Caleb had cover and the high ground. Men would die, and Holt needed his followers alive. "You speak of violence, Brother Whitaker, but we are men of peace, seeking only to reunite a child with her rightful keepers." "Keepers?" Caleb scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. You mean the 4 other kids you got chained up in those mountains? A flicker of surprise crossed Holt's face. He hadn't expected Caleb to know. You've made a grave mistake, he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. The children in my care are being prepared for the Lord's kingdom. What you call chains, I call salvation. A soft sob came from inside the house, and Holt's head tilted, his smile returning like a predator sensing weakness. There's our dove. Return her or face the Almighty's wrath. Caleb was done talking. He could win a fight against 7, but he didn't need to. He just needed time to get the girl to safety. The desert had taught him patience, and now it would save them. Tell you what, preacher, he said, lowering his rifle just enough to seem conciliatory. Your boys look parched. Water your horses at my trough, and we'll talk like civilized men. Holt hesitated, his eyes narrowing, then nodded. Brother Samuel, Brother Thomas, see to the horses. 2 men dismounted, leading their mounts to the water trough, their backs to the house, 50 yards from any cover. Caleb calculated angles. Knowing the trough's position gave him a tactical edge. You know, Caleb called out, his voice carrying across the yard, if that girl's so sinful, why not let the desert take her? Why come all this way? Holt's eyes gleamed with a dark, malicious light. She holds knowledge that could poison the others. She's seen too much, learned too much. She must be purified, or she'll serve as an example to those who defy the Lord's servants. The girl gasped from inside, understanding the threat. The men at the trough relaxed, wiping sweat from their faces, while the mounted riders spread out, thinking they had Caleb cornered. They were gravely mistaken. Caleb had faced every kind of desert predator, coyotes, bandits, storms, for 2 decades. These fanatics knew scripture, not survival. Time to move along, preacher, Caleb said, raising his voice with finality. The girl's not here, and your overstay you're welcome. Holt's face darkened, his smile vanishing. We know she's inside. Return her, or we'll take her by force, over your dead body if need be. Holt raised his staff, a sharp signal. The 5 mounted men drew their pistols in unison, but Caleb was ready. He dove off the porch, rolling behind the water barrel as bullets tore through the air. The girl's cry from inside wasn't fear. It was defiance, a spark of fury that refused to be snuffed out. Shots splintered the wood above Caleb's head as he pressed himself against the barrel, the dirt kicking up around him. The men at the trough scrambled for their guns. Caught out in the open, Caleb fired, dropping Brother Thomas before he could even draw. From inside the house came the sound of shattering glass. The girl was escaping through the back window, her silhouette a fleeting shadow against the rising sun. Seize the child. Holt roared, his voice shaking the air. Brother Samuel, Brother Nathan, flanked the house. Caleb rolled to the side, firing another shot, catching Brother Samuel in the shoulder. The man fell hard, but dragged himself toward the woodpile, clutching his wound. The mounted riders used their horses as living shields, returning fire with wild shots. But Caleb knew every inch of his land like the back of his hand. He crawled to a shallow trench, a relic from a long-ago raid, hidden by scrub and dust. From there, he had clear lines of fire to both sides of the house. Through the broken window, he saw the girl scrambling out, her small form darting toward the canyon's rugged cliffs and crevices. She was making for the caves, but Brother Nathan was closing in fast, his boots pounding the earth. Caleb took aim, his bullet grazing Nathan's arm, forcing him to dive behind a boulder. The girl gained a moment's lead, disappearing into the rocks. You cannot protect her forever. Hope bellowed, his voice echoing with rage. More men are coming from the gorge. Caleb's heart sank as he glanced west. Dust clouds rose on the trail. 5, maybe 7 more riders, their forms growing clearer with every second. The girl struggled to climb the rocky outcrop, her strength fading from days of torment. Caleb aimed at Hope but hesitated. Killing him might push his men to harm the girl in retaliation. He needed another way, a plan to outlast them. Preacher, Caleb shouted, his voice cutting to the gunfire. Let's settle this like men. No guns, just fists. Winner takes everything. Holt's laugh was a cold, mocking sound that echoed off the cliffs. You think I'm a fool, brother? This isn't about honor. It's about the will of God. A bullet grazed Caleb's ear, drawing blood, and a sharp cry of pain came from the rocks. The girl had stumbled, her body too weak to climb further. Brother Nathan sprinted toward her, revolver raised, his face set in grim determination. Caleb abandoned his cover, sprinting toward the canyon, bullets tearing through his shoulder and side. Pain lanced through him, but he reached the girl and threw himself over her, shielding her as Nathan fired. The bullet meant for her struck Caleb's chest, each breath a fiery torment. The girl knelt beside him, her small hands pressing desperately against his wound, her eyes filled with tears as she mouthed, "Thank you." Nathan loomed above them, his pistol aimed at Caleb's head. "Brother Jeremiah, I've got them both," he said, his voice cold. But then a new sound broke through, the thunder of hoofbeats, not from the west but from the north, steady and relentless. Not Holt's men, but U.S. cavalry troop, 15 riders strong, led by Captain Amos Reynolds, their sabers glinting in the morning light. "Jeremiah Amos Holt," Reynolds bellowed, his voice carrying the weight of law. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, child endangerment, and murder. Drop your weapons now." Holt's face paled, his staff trembling in his grip, but he raised it defiantly, screaming, "You cannot stop the work of the Lord." Nathan swung his pistol toward the soldiers, a reckless move, and Reynolds fired, a single shot that dropped him dead in the dust. The remaining men froze, their zeal evaporating under cavalry's guns, and they threw down their weapons, hands raised in surrender. Reynolds dismounted and knelt beside Caleb, his face grim as he saw the blood soaking his shirt. "How bad is it, cattleman?" he asked, his voice steady. Caleb coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Bad enough, but I'll live. There's for more kids out there, in Serpent's Gorge. You gotta find them." The girl, whose name was Emily, pointed toward the mountains, holding up 4 fingers with a trembling hand. Reynolds nodded, barking orders, and sent 8 of his men galloping toward the gorge, their horses kicking up clouds of sand. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, the cavalry returned, leading 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys, their faces thin and haunted, but alive. When they saw Emily safe, they ran to her, their sobs of relief echoing through the valley. Holt and his surviving followers were shackled and taken to face justice in Yuma, where they were tried and sentenced to hang within weeks. Their twisted crusade ended. Emily stayed with Caleb, her quiet courage helping him heal as he taught her to find joy in the small things, a sunrise, a hawk's cry, the warmth of a fire. 8 months later, a judge in Tucson made their bond official, granting Caleb guardianship. The desert, harsh and unyielding, had forged something rare and enduring between them, a family built on bravery, sacrifice, and the stubborn will to survive.